had to do something. He had to open up the vagina more to get her out.
PopCast vibes with Papa Barry. Stories wild and sometimes scary. Grandkids laugh and asking why. How'd you go from rabbi to spy?
Welcome back from the break. We're here with Papa again. We're welcoming on Charlie and Ezra. So Papa, we just spoke about how you met Bubby Shoshi, but let's get sort of more into the leading up to the marriage.
It was difficult. Not that it was difficult, but it wasn't like a normal college, like UMass or wherever, UPenn or wherever, where you go out on day, where you see each other. There are fraternity parties. There are other football game parties. There was nothing. YU and Stern had nothing. So I used to go down from YU to Stern, which was a somewhat long train ride. I went from 185th Street down to Stern on 31st Street, and I may have had to change a train or two, so it wasn't always easy. And then, we went out, but then there was a curfew. I didn't have a curfew, but she had a curfew, so we had to be back at a certain time. So I don't know what we did. We may have gone to a movie, we may have gone out for a little dinner or a snack, but it wasn't a normal college dating situation. Unfortunately, because of the schools that that we were in. But we did, we saw each other somewhat often, given the circumstances, and so it continued, and
So you guys didn't have a certain go-to spot or go-to?
Not really, not that I remember. It was just different things. I think we used to go to a lot of movies or go to a kosher restaurant.
And how long did you guys date for?
2 years. 2 years probably. Yeah.
Where did you guys end up getting married?
In Chicago.
Oh, you guys.
Yeah, Chicago.
Oh,
yeah, Chicago. When 1969.
How long? It was 2 years till you got engaged, or 2 years till you were married?
So we got engaged. I forgot when we got engaged, actually. But 69 was the year after that I graduated. And if we met in 67 or something, so we dated for a year or two, and then got married.
Got married in Chicago?
In Chicago.
And then you said from there you went to live in...
So we went to live in, we lived right by Yankee Stadium. And this was fun, because my job, as I said, I was working for the city of New York as this go-between between kids who were out of school and trying to figure out how to get them back in. So anyway, I had a caseload, and they allowed you X amount of hours to do the caseload. Well, I could do the caseload in half the time that they allowed me to. So I had the afternoons free. And in those days, if I walked, we were right by Yankee Stadium. We were on the Grand Concourse in New York, which was a nice street. So we were right by Yankee Stadium. And I would walk down in about the sixth inning, and I would see the Yankee wives. They got to know me already. And I would walk into the stadium with this was in those days it was low security. Nobody really cared. And I walked into the stadium with the Yankee wives, and I used to sit in an empty seat and watch the ball game. It was tremendous.
Good deal.
It was a good deal.
And what was Bubby up to?
She was, I don't know, was she still in school at that time? I think she was still in school. Because it was from there that we moved up to Kingston, New York. So she was still in school. Yeah. So I was working, she was still in school. And it was fun. We had a nice little apartment. We couldn't figure out how to put the bed together. So my brother Phil, who was very good with his hands, and he was in New York at the time. So he came over and put the bed together and set it. So anyway, we had a nice little apartment on the Grand Concourse, and we liked it.
Nice. And how long did you live there?
Year and a half? About a year and a half,
From
yeah.
there you moved to Connecticut?
From there up to Kingston, New York first, and then a year and a half in Kingston, New York, and then we went to New London, Connecticut.
What were your relationships like with each other's families?
Okay, yeah, okay.
Do
Well,
you guys see each other a lot? Each other's families, or?
well, the Chicago family, no, because we were in New York and they were in Chicago. So we didn't really get to see each other, or even in New London, Connecticut. I mean, we would see each other. We would come in for Pesach every year, and maybe one or two other times, but we didn't get to see Chicago that often. Springfield, Massachusetts was very close to New London, Connecticut, so we did get to see my parents a little more. Yeah.
Okay. And
That
after
was-
moving up to Connecticut, what
Yeah, so
were you
it
guys each doing?
Bubby Shoshi, believe it or not, became the director or the head person at a health club. At a health club that had a lot of different kinds of things, and I was the director of the federation, and we'll lead into the spy story. But part of my responsibilities in New London. In New London, there was a college there called, Connecticut College, which is a very good college. And part of my responsibility was to be the Hillel director over at Connecticut College. And I'll mention why that was important later. But so I did it. So I ran the community. I did the fundraising for the UJA. We did pretty well, and I ran certain programs that the federation ran, and I was the Hillel director. One person that I got to meet, one of our very good friends, was a couple. I forget their name now, but they lived like in the same complex as us. And his sister, the husband's sister, was married to Ron Bloomberg, who played for the Yankees. He has a place in history. He was the first designated hitter in all of baseball, and so Ron came to visit, and we used to go out to Bubby Shoshi's health club where he would work out, and we would work out together. But anyway, so I got to meet Ron Bloomberg that way. That was nice.
Very cool.
Very cool. And then I caught up with him later because the Yankees at that time used to train down in Fort Lauderdale. So when we moved to Fort Lauderdale, and I would.
Like spring training would be
Spring training would be
Right.
would be there. So yeah,
nice. And how?
it was a very nice experience. New London, Connecticut, was a really good experience.
How many
for us.
years were you guys there?
4, I think.
4 years.
4
Nice.
years. Yeah, it was very nice.
And you liked the community. You
I liked the community. Did not plan on leaving. Something else just fell in our lap.
What made you?
Well, so going ahead for a moment, after we had the spy experience, I was asked to speak about it, and one of the communities that invited me, there was a group in Fort Lauderdale or whatever, heard about it, so they invited me down. So I went down and I spoke, and at the time, Fort Lauderdale was a city that had a sign on the beaches: "No dogs and Jews allowed." I mean, it was really an anti-Semitic city. There's about 5,000 Jews who lived there, but overnight, because of the weather, and it was going from 5,000 people to 100,000 people. Jews.
What year was this?
This was 74, roughly 74. So they wanted to build a community. They had no Jewish community center. They had no Jewish family service. They had no Jewish day school. They had no facilities whatsoever. So they wanted someone to build up a community. And I guess they liked the speech I gave or whatever, so they took me aside afterwards and they said, "We'd like you to come down. We'd like you to be the director of the Fort Lauderdale Jewish Federation."
So.
And I said, "Oh, you gotta be," I said, "Well, this was, listen, Bubby Shoshi and I, our lives were centered around New York, New England, the Northeast. This was, we went to school there, we had jobs there, this, for us to leave, to go down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida was a big deal. So we talked about it and we said, as sad as we are to leave New London, Connecticut, this was another nice step up, a major step up for me. And we took the job.
How long did you live?
We lived in Fort Lauderdale for about 5 years. and we bought a house that had a swimming pool in it. Matter of fact, the first thing that I bought for the house was not any furniture. It was one of those chairs that you sit in the pool in, and they have the armchairs with the thing with the, for the tea. So you put the iced tea in. So that was the first thing I bought. So anyway, it was a cute little house. It was a great house. Your mother was born there. You were born in Plantation General Hospital, which is another funny story, but she was, yeah. So
we're gonna get back a bit to the spy story a bit later, but putting that aside for now, tell us a bit about starting to have kids. Ema, the Uncle Gabe, tell us about that story.
Well, the story was, we were in Fort Lauderdale, and we had a nice life, and we decided that we're gonna have kids, and Bubby Shoshi got pregnant, and then we went to the movie. I'll never forget it. The movie was Jaws. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the movie, Bubby Shoshi said, "I have a problem." And we went to the hospital, and she unfortunately miscarried, they call it. And,
how far along was she?
I forget, but she was somewhat far along. Not 9 months, but, And so, it was a little bit difficult period for her. And anyway, so then the next year we planned to spend the whole summer in Israel, and we rented an apartment for 2 months. We had a friend that I met through the UJA. He was a speaker for the UJA. He was the legal advisor to the IDF, and his name was Jonathan. I forget his last name. So I became friends with Jonathan through the speaking that I had him do, and he got us the apartment. So we spent 2 months in Israel, and not to get into detail, but that's where your mother was conceived. Anyway, there's no rating on this, baby. This is unleashed.
Yeah.
Unleashed.
It's uncensored.
So anyway, so one of the people that I worked with, one of the ladies that was involved in the federation, was a lady by the name of Phyllis Chudnow. She was wonderful. She was a great leader, and her husband was an obstetrician, and that was our obstetrician. And this was at the time where they were first introducing fathers being in the delivery room, and I had to take a class, in which I was supposed to teach Bubby Shoshi how to breathe in a paper bag and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm out somewhere one evening, and I get Bubby Shoshi says, "Time, we're going to the hospital." So I knew where the hospital was, but I drove back to the house, and I froze. I didn't remember how to get to the hospital. So Bubby Shoshi directed me to the hospital, and we went in, and I'm in this room with the baby, and your mother was a breech baby, it's called. In other words, rather than come out face down, she was coming out legs down. And so he had to do something. He had to open up the vagina more to get her out. So anyway, she comes out, and I'm supposed to be there breathing. So your mother comes out, and Urema says, Bubby Shoshi says, "Well, how's my baby?" And Dr. Chudnow says, he says, "Shoshana, your baby is fine, but your husband is on the floor fainting." True story. So this is true. All my stories are true, but this one really happened. So anyway, and we had there's another cute story. So through my work, the mayor of Sunrise, Florida, was a guy by the name of John LaMello. I remember his name. Now John LaMello was kind of a gangster. He was a gangster he had some shady dealings. So anyway, we had your mother, Bubby Shoshi and I wrote perhaps definitely one of, if not maybe the first, but certainly one of the first. Bubby Shoshi said, "We're having a ceremony." for a girl, as you know, you go to shul on a Monday, Thursday, or Shabbat, and you name the baby. Bubby Shoshi said, no, that's not good enough. We're gonna have a ceremony, and we wrote a baby naming service that I still use to this day. By the way, I still.
Really?
And it was a great service, and so we had a big party. So John LaMello wanted to run for Congress, so he wanted to impress me, right? So he sends over a huge, I had never seen anything this big, a huge bouquet, a huge flower display. It was unbelievable. So anyway, maybe a month later, the Miami Herald does a hard-hitting piece on John LaMello. I said, where does John LaMello spend his money? And it centered in on, he spent in the year $20,000 worth of flowers. So he said, who merited flowers from John LaMello? Number one, he had just opened the Sunrise Theater. So, and the first performer was Frank Sinatra. So he's the number one person that merited flowers from John LaMello, big bouquet, was Frank Sinatra. Number two was Barry Axler. I was getting calls from all over. But anyway, so that would, and then if you want to get, honest, so Uncle Harry Nelson in Gary, Indiana, owned a diaper business, both the baby diaper and senior diaper company. And he had two children who died tragically. And the third, Bill Nelson, was a college professor. He didn't want to go into the family business. So the family put pressure on me, Jeanette and Bob, and let's get our daughter back to Chicago. And they said, you got to come back and help Harry run the business. Harry wanted to go to Phoenix and play golf a lot, so he needed somebody to run the business. So we left. I succumbed to the pressure, and we left Fort Lauderdale. Tremendous life and tremendous job, and we came back. We lived in Lansing, Illinois for a few years before we moved to our first apartment in Chicago, and I ran the diaper business.
How long did you work?
It's about 2 years. I hated it. I learned a lot. I must say I learned a lot of business. I did. I learned a lot, but we had drivers who were driving trucks off the road in the winter time, and I mean, it was just not the best thing I did, or the funniest thing I did was we had the mayor of Gary, Indiana was a client of ours. Anyway, we had these white trucks that had a baby with blocks on it, and it said Tiny Tot Diaper Service. So when Harry went away for the winter, I had them write on it. So it said Tiny Tot Diaper Service. Then I had them write, we take crap from our customers. So anyway, so we did that, and I walked into Harry's office one day and I said, I can't do this anymore. And so he said, okay, and then I'm gonna sell the business, and I need you to stay with me till I sell the business, because I can sell the business better if you're here, if they see there's operation. I said, sure, I owe that to you. So I stayed, and it sold pretty quickly because it was a very good business. And then we were living in Chicago by that time. And then the man who was for 25 years was the head of American Friends of Technion University, he passed away, and the position was open. And just about the same time that I was leaving Harry, and that position came open, and I applied for it. And even though I was still at a young age, I was maybe 30 years old or something, I got the position as the head of America for the Midwest, as the head of American Friends for Technion. And it was probably one of the best jobs I ever had. I was there for 8 years, and met a lot of great people, and did a fantastic job. I think I was raising protecting on, I don't know, 12, $14 million a year, which was a lot. We had offices in different, by that time Dota Miura was born. She was born when I was still with Tiny Dot Diaper Service. And we went to, so I would take the family with me in the summer I would go visit the other communities that I was responsible for. So one was Minneapolis. I'd like that. There was Milwaukee, there was Minneapolis. We went to North Dakota. I covered North Dakota.
With the diapers?
No, it was all with Technion.
Oh, at the time.
Technion. And so we were in Minneapolis, and your Dota Miura, all of a sudden we're around the pool or whatever, and all of a sudden she just jumps into the pool.
How old was she?
Yeah, she was young. I mean, she was young. And what are we gonna do? And she can't swim. She was young, and I'm in street clothes, so I took out my wallet and I jumped into the pool with my street clothes on to pull her out. But anyway, so it was a great job. We had,
You knew how to swim at a young age because of the pool in the yard, right?
Yeah. The pool was great. It was a nice pool. The pool was great. That was quite the
I
experience.
want to take it for 1 minute back to Fort Lauderdale and Florida. On the different things you guys did for the community there. Can we hear about those?
Well, yeah. Well, one of the best things we did, and by the way, the school honored Bubby Shoshi. Did you know this?
Yeah.
The school honored Bubby Shoshi. There were 6 of us that wanted to start a Jewish day school. The leadership at the Federation did not understand Jewish day schools. Jewish day schools aren't like they are today, prevalent and around a long time. This was unique. And they would say to themselves, well, we're leaders in the community. We're Jewishly active. What do we need a Jewish school for? So it was hard to convince them. So anyway, there were 6 of us and 6 couples, and we worked hard. And one of the very good stories was one of the couples, the wives, was a niece to Meyer Lansky. You know who Meyer Lansky was? He was the biggest Jewish criminal of all time, mafia. He was big. He came to Israel and he wanted to live here, and the U.S. force made him. He was the treasurer to the mob. So the mob was Italian, except for Meyer Lansky and who's the guy that started Bugsy Siegel. So Bugsy Siegel and Lansky were the Jews in the operation, but Lansky was the big guy. He was the money guy, and you didn't cross Meyer Lansky. So this was after the feds tried to get him, and the Israel they forced he helped build some of I think the Sheraton was the first hotel on the beach or something, and that was Meyer Lansky's. Anyway, they forced him to come back. So the niece says to me, well, you do fundraising. You call Uncle Meyer and see what you can do. I said, wait a second, he's your uncle. You call Uncle Meyer. No, you call Uncle Meyer. So I called him and I made an appointment to go down to see him. Now this is the biggest guy in the mafia. I mean, but at the time he was living in a place off of one of the islands, off of Miami Beach. It was nice, and he was a little tiny guy. He was frail. He was very. I mean, it was a very pleasant conversation. It was very nice to me, but it was, And he says to me, "Okay, here's what I'm going to do for you." He said, "I'm going to give you $1 million." Now, at the time, $1 million to start that school was, you can't believe how big it was. He said, I understand you can't name the school after me, controversial. But he said, I want first right of refusal. I don't want the school doing any fundraising, raising any more money beyond what you need without first coming to me. Sounded okay to me. I mean, for us, $1 million for that school was the end of the world. So I bring it back to the group, and they turn it down. They didn't want Lansky having the power over them and this and that. I said, you gotta be kidding. So the niece says to me, well, you're gonna have to call Uncle Meyer and tell him. I said, you're shitting me. I am shaking in my boots. So you remember the line? Remember the movie The Godfather? Have you all seen it, The Godfather?
Yeah.
So I made you an offer that you have to refuse, and that there's a line in there. So I called Meyer Lansky up, and I'm shaking, and I said, "Mr. Lansky," he says, "Yes." I said, "You made us an offer that we have to refuse." He started to laugh. He was okay with it, but
Is that the
anyway,
real reason you left Florida?
no, he was nice. So, but we started the school, and today it's.
Where did you end up getting the funding?
I convinced the leadership of the Jewish Federation to give us some money. I mean, I went to my bosses, to my lay people, and I said, "You got to give us money to start the school."
All right.
I said, "It's really important." So we did, and when Bubby Shoshi passed away, they did a day of learning in her memory. I mean, we would get invited even after when we left Fort Lauderdale. When they had something, they would always include us in the invitation to invite us to come back for it. So it was a very nice experience.
So fast forward back to Chicago. Tell us a bit. Uncle Gabe was born, raising kids in Chicago.
Yeah, so we moved back first, and then we moved into the house on Pratt with money. When Uncle Harry sold the business, he gave me some money, and we used that money as a down payment for the 2939 Pratt. And so we moved in. It was nice, and it was good. The Technion job was great. It was wonderful. I would go over once or twice a year. I would bring groups over. I would host scientists from Technion. Really, really good. I raised several 1 million. I raised about for Technion individuals about 3 or 4 people who gave me $1 million for one project or another. The most famous story is. Lester Crown, who's the richest person in Chicago. So he had a friend by the name of Monty Monister, who was a stock person. And anyway, Monty Monister was a big right winger. So he went to Lester Crown, and he said to Lester, I want to buy guns and whatever for the Israeli army. And Lester Crown said, "You can't buy guns for the Israeli army," but he said, "What you can do is call Barry Axler over at the Technion." I had met Lester a couple of times. He said, "Call Barry Axler over at the Technion, and they do the research. The Technion does the research for the arms, for the airplanes, or for high-tech stuff. Technion is the military research arm. Israel's not big enough to have its own, so Monty Monister calls me up, and we meet, and he gives me $250,000 and a check, which is a lot of money. I said, "Thank you." Then General Amos Chorev, who was the president of the Technion at the time, was coming over. And prior to his being president of the Technion, he was in charge of the military's arms purchases. So whatever guns or whatever it was, Amos Chorev was in charge of military purchases. So Amos Chorev comes over, and I set up a meeting with Monty Monister, and they're talking guns, and Anyway, when the meeting is over, Monty Monister turns to Chorev and he says, "I'm going to give you $1 million, and I'll pay it out whether I'm alive or not. It'll be $100,000 a year for 10 years, but I'm giving you $1 million." Well, Monister leaves, and Chorev is really excited. $1 million, and I said, "General," I said, "there's more money there. I can get more money." So he said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You're crazy." I said, "That we're not arguing that. Everybody knows I'm crazy." I said, "No, we're arguing. I can do." I said, you were in charge of purchases. I said, "What I want you to do is go back and get me a Uzi submachine gun." It's a true story. And so he says, "You're really crazy." I said, "Amos, please get me a Uzi submachine gun." Well, I don't hear anything. A couple months later, I get a call from an arms dealer, one of the biggest in Philadelphia, Jewish guy, forget his name. And he says to me, "I have good news and bad news." He says, "I have your Uzi submachine gun. But because of a shooting in Chicago years ago, whatever, you can't bring an Uzi gun into Chicago. It isn't allowed. So I said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So I went to the police department and I found who was the highest ranking Jew in the Chicago Police Department. And I went to see him. I made an appointment to see him. And I said, listen, here's the story. There's a university in Israel, Technion, that does arms research. There's a guy here in Chicago that I can get $1 million from. But I need to bring in a Uzi submachine gun, and only you can bring it in for me. So he says, okay. He says, yeah, I'll do it for you. So the Uzi he brings in the Uzi, it comes. It's an Uzi submachine gun, fully operable, but it's in this styrofoam case. So I called the arms dealer and I said, I got the gun and it's wonderful, but the case is lousy. I said, you got to get me get me like a wooden case with velvet lined in the inside that the gun fits in with a plaque on it and says, Tamani Monaster from the students of the Technion, we appreciate your allowing us to make Israel safe, or something like that on the plaque. He said, the case is going to cost you more than the gun. I said, buddy, I'm looking for $1 million. I don't care how much the case cost me. Get me the case. So the case comes, and I put it in velvet, just like I wanted, wooden, velvet lined, gun fits in. Now I'm ready. So I call Monty up. I said, Monty, I have a special gift for you. Can I come over? He said, sure. So I come over, and I'm carrying the thing, and it looks like a briefcase, so he doesn't know. And I'm carrying him, we're schmoozing for a bit. And I said, Monty, here's my special gift for you from the students at the Technion. And he opens it up, and he sees a fully operable Uzi submachine gun. He lifts it up like he was lifting up a baby, and he starts to cradle it and rub it, and and there were tears. There were tears in the guy's eyes. And he says, what can I do for you for this gift? I said, Monty, here's the problem at the Technion. I said, we don't have enough dorm space. I said, we are turning away students who could build guns like this to kill Arabs. He says, how much is a dorm? I said, it's $1 million, Monty. He says, he runs in the other room. He goes in the other room and he comes back, and I've never seen a check before he gives me a check for $1 million.
That's crazy.
And he says to me, and he says, by the way, he says, this has nothing to do with what I promised the general, the $100,000 a year. I said, I knew that, Monty. I could have told you that from the start. So anyway, that's one of my best stories.
What did you do after the Technion job?
I went to Israel Bonds. I was a little bit ambitious. My goal was to one day have a national Jewish organization. And in order to do that, the Technion office was 3 people. And by the way, I'll tell you about Winston Churchill III. That also met it. I met some great people at the Technion. So anyway, I wanted to head a national Jewish organization, and the only way I could do it was to head an organization that had more people than 3 people. So the Israel Bond job was open, and it was an office of 21 people. And I applied for it and got it. And Israel Bonds is not a charity; it's a financial instrument. But I sold a lot of Israel Bonds, and so I took it, and I lasted for 4 or 5 years. I just didn't like it because I was doing more management of an office. I was trying to solve fights between the secretaries and all that, and I wasn't doing what I was good at, and that's raising money. Although I did raise, for example, we sold the state of Illinois $30 million for their pension funds in Israel Bonds. The bank, some of the Northern Trust Bank bought a lot of Israel Bonds for their bank portfolio. So I was selling $35+ million a year,
Wow.
So that was good.
Well, we're gonna take a break now, but stay tuned to hear about the spy story and some more about
PopCast vibes with Papa Barry. Stories wild and sometimes scary. Grandkids laugh and asking why. How'd you go from rabbi to spy?